he said, you know, I'm thinking of it's been done before.
Oh, it has?
Yeah. I said, do you put the milk on bill and then you put an additional it's been done before?
Oh, it has?
Yeah, as an emergency and the sausage being made. It's a very ugly process.
Good afternoon. I am very pleased to welcome President Pastrana. President Pastrana is a true leader who has earned world respect through his comprehensive plan and his determined effort to bring peace and the rule of law to his people. It's no secret that Colombia is under siege by drug traffickers and illegal armed groups that have victimized average citizens in both cities and the countryside and sought to terrorize judges, prosecutors, and other judicial personnel. The United States has pledged to assist Colombians in building security, halting the production of illegal drugs, and exploring prospects for a peaceful end to their long-standing internal conflict. Earlier this year, President Clinton proposed a $1.6 billion in emergency supplemental appropriations for Colombia, and that request has since been approved by the House of Representatives but is being delayed in the Senate. Today, I renew the administration's call for rapid action. 4/5 of the cocaine entering our country either comes from Colombia or is transported through it. Most of Colombia's heroin production also ends up here. Throughout the Americas, drug-related activities fuel crime and corruption, aggravate social problems, and retard economic progress. The emergency aid President Clinton has requested will help Bogota extend its authority over parts of the country now dominated by guerrillas, paramilitaries, and drug traffickers. It will support alternative development programs, increase our backing for narcotics interdiction, and strengthen mechanisms for judicial reform, human rights, and humanitarian assistance. Recognizing that neither criminals nor conflicts respect national borders, the President's request will also support counter-drug initiatives in other Andean countries. Only Colombians can devise a solution for Colombia's ills, and President Pastrana has put forward a bold plan for doing just that. It's urgent that we support him, not with the promise of help, but with its reality, not eventually, but now. In our meeting today, we discussed the administration's aid requests, Plan Colombia, President Pastrana's political reform initiative, and the central importance of building strong democratic institutions and improving respect for human rights. Earlier this year, I had the pleasure of visiting Colombia. It's one of the most beautiful places on earth with a magnificent culture and a lot of brave people risking their lives on behalf of peace and law. And so I am very glad to have President Pastrana, who is one of those brave people, here, and I'm very honored, Mr. President, that you have come to see us again.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Mr. President.
Yes, I think nothing more to add about what Madam Secretary has said about our meeting. I think it was a very productive meeting. We talked about the Plan Colombia, how it's going forward in the U.S. Congress, and we hope to get this aid from the United States as soon as possible. We talk about our political reforms and how to implement the strategy to fight narcotics and to implement these alternative development programs in these areas in which we have problems right now in our country. So once again, to Madam Secretary, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to be here in the State Department, and I think that we're open for questions.
Betsy, please, thank you.
Mr. President and Madam Secretary, there are reports that Russian mobs are supplying FARC guerrillas in Colombia with sophisticated arms in exchange for cocaine. Can you verify these reports, and has an effort been made to stop or interrupt these shipments?
Yeah, we don't have at least I talked this morning with the General Tapias, Chief Commander of the Armed Forces of Colombia, and we are investigating all these report that I think was brought on TV in the weekend. We're investigating, but we don't have the real evidence at this moment. We are controlling with the armed forces, we are controlling with the police or borders to avoid any entrance of arms and shipment of arms to our country that are going to be used in the insurgent groups or the guerrilla groups. But we don't have any evidence at this moment of the information that was brought on TV on the weekend.
From our perspective, we are obviously concerned about the acquisition of arms by Colombian rebels. That's a matter of concern to us and something that we watch very carefully. We are also concerned about reports of Russian organized crime activity in Colombia and the increased demand for cocaine in Europe and Russia and the former Eastern European countries. But we are not in a position to discuss these assertions of intelligence information.
President Pastrana, this morning, drug czar Barry McCaffrey said that the paramilitaries had a plan to kill you. Can you talk about that, please?
Well, at this moment, we don't have any information. I don't think that's the only plan to kill ourselves that we know about it. We have some, as you remember, some months ago there was a plan to kill us, but we don't have any at this moment any type of information regarding a criminal attempt of the paramilitaries to kill the President of Colombia.
First, President Pastrana, you said that you want to get this money as quickly as possible. Is there a time after which you would feel it's too late to get your plan moving? How soon do you need it realistically? And then for Secretary Albright, just before he left, Prime Minister Barak said that he was prepared to cede 2 Jerusalem suburbs, their contiguous suburbs, to the Palestinians. Do you find that helpful?
Yes. As I said before, the sooner the better. I think that, as you know, I only have 2 more years in my presidency. I cannot be reelected. And I really want to implement as soon as possible the program that we have discussed with the United States and we are discussing with Europe, the Plan Colombia. I think that if we really want to avoid the growing of these type of crops or cocaine or poppy in Colombia, we need the money because we need to invest not only in the eradication program, but also in investing in the alternative development programs. And we need to work as soon as possible. We have a commitment to eradicate 50% of these crops in the next 5 years. As you remember, in the last 4 years, crops doubled in our country. And that's why we think that not only with the resources for promoting alternative development, but also the resources to support the police and the army in this fight against drugs will be very important for us. So I think that it's the sooner, as I said, the better, and we will start to implement this program as soon as possible.
Let me just add, as we've said a number of times, President Clinton has made this very clear, is that it's urgent that we get this done, which is why the President presented it in a supplemental and now wants to have it moved. We have put a great deal of effort into it, and President Pastrana himself has spent a lot of time on this, as has his ambassador here, and I think we need to move this forward. It is an urgent issue. Otherwise, we would not have presented it as an urgent issue. On the issue of Prime Minister Barak, he is coming here to talk to us about the whole process of moving the Palestinian track on as quick a basis as we can get it done. Again, here, this is an issue that needs to be done as rapidly as it can, given the movement of the calendar. And so, obviously, the movement of villages and transfer of land is one of the questions that comes up, and we'll be talking about it when he gets here.
Mr. President, Madam Secretary, for both of you, how is this referendum thing going to affect the aid for Colombia?
Well, I don't think it has anything to do. Really, we're proposing a political reform that we propose as a candidate. Now we are getting through a referendum, that it's a constitutional way of really reforming our political institutions, reforming and fighting one of the most dangerous cancers that we have, that is corruption. But I don't think it has anything to do with the plan, with the Colombia plan. By the contrary, I think that's something that is going united: corruption and peace. As you know, many of the violence in our country, as even the insurgent group says, and as we've been saying for many years, is caused because of corruption. And that's why I think for the first time we are attacking one problem in the same hand, with political reform, and at the same time bringing up and going forward with the table of negotiations.
The President and I talked about this, and I was very interested in his plans, and I think it's just one more sign of President Pastrana's dedication to make his country work and to have the support of the people and to move forward on a very large agenda that is important to making Colombia a democratic, non-corrupt, and good participating country in the problems of the region, as well as in our hemisphere. So I was very interested in the President's move on this.
Madam Secretary, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on the elections in Peru, which seem to be coming close to their conclusion at the moment.
Well, I think that what is of concern to us is that there seems to be conflicting information on the results from the international observers and what comes out of Peru itself. The final results are not available yet, as you know. But I think that we are concerned about the inconsistencies, and I think that one of the questions here will be is how they handle it there, because I think that there'll be a question about the legitimacy if these kinds of inconsistencies are there between what the international observers are saying and what the local reports are.
Presidente, buenas tardes. El diario de Reunión dice hoy en sus artículos que hay caos político en Colombia tras la renuncia del jefe de la oposición. Y hay también una noticia que tiene que ver con la reducción de la calificación de la deuda colombiana por parte de Stanley Fisher. ¿Cómo responde usted a quienes dicen que hay caos político y económico en Colombia?
No, I don't think there's an international chaos in Colombia because of we convoked the referendum. 97% since, or between 19 to 97% of the polls show the people supporting the referendum to fight corruption and to change the way of doing politics in Colombia, financing the campaigns, what are we going to do with the reform of the Congress, and fight really corruption in the whole state. I think that the polls show that we have a big support, that Colombia is wanting and willing to vote in the referendum to change the way of doing politics in our country. Secondly, regarding the economy, today even we have a meeting with the IMF, and we were going to talk to them about the targets and the goals that as Colombian government we were committed, and we are on the schedule to approve these reforms. We hope that the Congress of Colombia will approve the reforms, the economic reforms in this legislature, that it will finish or end it in the middle of June, and we hope that in the second term, if we elect a new Congress in December or otherwise after the 20th of July in the second legislature of this year. We were going to talk with the IMF. We will have a meeting also with Secretary Summers this afternoon with the Treasury Secretary, also to exchange some of the ideas, but the Colombian government is committed. We have some goals. We are in the schedule, and we hope that the Congress will approve the reforms that right now are inside the House and in the Senate of Colombia.
The President and I discussed this also, and I think that his commitment to following through with what the IMF has been talking about is very important. It goes to the question that you asked about the status of assistance, and the President has obviously thought these issues through so that following through on a schedule should not be a problem.
Madam Secretary, what is the U.S. doing, or what might it do to try to prepare for an orderly Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon, if indeed the withdrawal can be put in a Syrian overall agreement?
Well, I think that what has been said over and over again is that Resolution 425 and 426 are in effect the resolutions that have been governing this, and the Israelis have indicated that they would do it in accordance with Resolution 425. And we are going to be discussing this further with them as well as with the United Nations.
But do you have any, can you offer us any practical steps that the U.S. might take? Because there's concern, certainly Mr. Barak has expressed concern that this could be a violent situation.
Well, we hope very much that it would not end up that way. Obviously, it is a difficult border. Mr. Barak has indicated that he would withdraw. It's kind of strange that countries are criticized from withdrawing from territory. I think that we will be watching it very carefully, but he has made very clear that he would do it in accordance with 425. And I think that that is a very important statement coming from his side.
Last question, Ben Barber, please. Yeah. Wait for the mic, please, behind you. Thanks. Mr. Pastrana, the rural portions of your population do not have access to health care. And I just wondered, why are you here seeking military support? And instead of supplying your own population with health care out in the countryside. And Secretary Albright, the bulk of the military aid that's been you're attempting to deliver to Colombia is to be spent in the south, where the cocaine is grown. But that's also where the FARC, the leftist rebels, are the strongest. These paramilitary groups, which you've also mentioned, are in the north, and it looks as though the money is really aimed at fighting the communists rather than the paramilitaries, who are also a great source of problem to Colombia. Could you address those issues?
If you allow me, I will try to get also in the second question. I think one important thing of Plan Colombia is that Plan Colombia is a plan for the whole country. It's not only for the south of the country. And that's why we're investing our own money. Colombia is putting near $4 billion in this program. U.S. is putting $1.6 billion, and the rest we're asking for the international community. So we're going to invest in the north and the south, and the east and the west. The worst thing that could happen to the country is to fracture the country. That if you're in war, we're going to invest resources. But if you're in peace, we're not going to invest resources. And that's why the plan is committed to invest in the whole country. Secondly, that's a very good question. The one you ask about health, not only health, housing, fighting poverty. Colombia is investing $1.2 billion a year in fighting drugs, to avoid drugs to come into the United States and to go into Europe. That's why sometimes many people ask me that question, why the Colombian government is investing instead of housing, in water supply, in health, in avoiding drugs to go into the United States and to Europe. And that's why we are proposing Plan Colombia, because instead of pointing out who is the responsible of this problem, we know that we have a common enemy, that is narco-trafficking. That it not only causes poverty in our country, we are a very poor country, and we're investing a lot of money in avoiding drugs to come to the United States. And that's why for the first time, we create a coherent, a comprehensive program called Plan Colombia, asking all the international community to be involved in this program, not only to fight narcotics, looking the military side of narcotics or narco-trafficking, but also alternative development. Most of the program that we want to invest in the Plan Colombia wants to go really into implement policies on health, on structural reforms, strengthening our institution, human rights, and alternative development and social investment. We want to invest most of this money that we want, and we're asking for the international community, in social development, because we cannot solve only the problem, looking this as a military problem or a policing or aspect or the repression problem. We want to get into the real essence of the problem, that it's bringing back to Colombia prosperity and health and richness to their people, and that's the way of eradicating drugs from our soil and from our territory.
Let me say, in discussing Plan Colombia with President Pastrana throughout its formation and when I was down there and generally in the very close contacts we have, what I have been most impressed by is the comprehensiveness of this. In the number of meetings, internal meetings that I've had here on Colombia, it has been so evident to me that not only do we have to deal with the narco-trafficking problem, the issue of the peace process, the social issues, anti-corruption, that this all goes together. And what was so impressive about Plan Colombia is that it does in fact knit all these various pieces together. In terms of what we're asking for, $240 million over 2 years is actually going to alternative development to assist in some of the internal problems and try to enhance good governance, work on the anti-corruption, human rights, and various other social issues that are very important. So we see it as a comprehensive program. Obviously, the narco-trafficking is the core, the guts of the problem that we have to deal with, and that's why the money is addressed to helping the police and then the military to provide protection for the police. And the military battalions that are going along with this have been specially selected, and each of them cleared case by case on human rights issues. And on the paramilitaries, we are very concerned about those. The President and I discussed it when I was in Cartagena, and we just spent a lot of time talking about them here. So that is also part of the problem that has to be dealt with. They are part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as I imagine you have questions, the same thing happened with Roberto yesterday. Good morning. We had a meeting with, have lunch with the Secretary of Treasury, because I think it's important for you what we are proposing in Colombia, and it's fair.
Talk about defense legislation, and we're going into. I apologize that my Spanish is not proficient enough yet to speak in Spanish, so I'll speak in English. But I just had another very good meeting with President Pastrana, assured him of my commitment and the commitment of the Congress, and I believe the administration, to provide aid to Colombia, to support economic development, and to assist in fighting the drug war there in Colombia. It's a very important country that we want to have a strong relationship with. We're very supportive of President Pastrana's efforts, and while sometimes the legislative process can get distracted into procedural discussions, here's the main point. We are committed to this Colombian aid package. We're going to get it at the earliest possible date, hopefully in late May or early June, and we'll have language that says that when the President signs that particular bill, that the Colombian drug portion of it, or the Colombian aid package, would be available at that time. In other words, in the year 2000. And so while the legislative process still moves forward, I want to make it very clear that we are still, and I am still committed to the Colombian aid package.
Is it for attaching it to a first appropriations bill, or you still would like to see it break it down into more?
We still have that option. We'll have to see what the first bill would be. That could be done. Certainly it will be attached to one of the earliest 2 or 3 bills. The Foreign Relations Appropriations Bill hopefully would move early in the process, but if for some reason it's going to be a problem, then we'd look at another earlier bill, perhaps the military construction appropriations bill. But again, I think if you get into the procedure and which bill, you can just go on forever. The point is we're going to find an early opportunity to get this funding approved.
Any restrictions, Senator? Any restrictions?
Well, you know, it will have to be written that would provide aid in certain areas and not necessarily in others. But the President has had a proposal he submitted in the House. They actually increased the funding in several areas, but it was different in some respects from what the President looked for. And then, you know, the Senate may have a little different order of priorities, but it'll be very close to where it all began, and it'll be hopefully the most effective package in providing President Pastrana and the people in Colombia to move toward peace and freedom and controlling the drug problem that is coming out of certain sections of the country. Mr. President, you want to respond to any of this?
Senator, you cannot assure that this will be approved by May or June, can you?
By what?
By June or May?
In the legislative process and in government, you cannot give any absolute guarantees of anything. But I feel very strongly that it will be completed in May or in early June. There's no reason why it should not. And I expect it will be achieved and would be available in this fiscal year.
¿Eso le satisface, presidente?
Sí, muy satisfecho. Yo creo que, como dijo ya el senador Lott, lo importante es que hay un compromiso que se está buscando, como ya lo ha reiterado él, los procedimientos, los mecanismos, pero estamos seguros, como también él lo ha reiterado, que hacia finales de mayo o comienzos de junio podamos tener nosotros los recursos para el Plan Colombia, como claramente ha sido el compromiso del Congreso y del Gobierno de los Estados Unidos.
¿Entendió las razones por las cuales no se quiere tramitar a través de una emergencia?
Sí, eso es una cuestión procedimental, como ha dicho el senador Lott, y lo importante es que hay ese compromiso, reitero, de que quieren colaborar y quieren participar en el Plan Colombia y colaborar en la lucha contra la droga que estamos librando los colombianos contra este enemigo común que es el narcotráfico.
Did you know something about Millennium 2?
Yes, the operation is...
Oh, yes. The President has spoken to me about this on more than one occasion, and I think it's a very worthwhile effort, and we're supporting his efforts in that regard, and to try to move Colombia as a whole forward for the good of the people.
Senator, congressmen in both sides of the aisle and in both chambers are saying that you're the only one not backing emergency supplemental. And even President Clinton is insisting that he doesn't like the procedure that you have now stated.
You know, the President can support his procedures, and I have to support the ones that we believe can get the job done here. Again, the point is, if you get into trying to figure the legislative process, the procedure, and all of that, it could take quite a while. Here's the point. I am supportive of the Colombian aid, and we are going to get it done, and it's going to be available in this fiscal year, and it's going to be available this summer. Good luck, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Your President, Christian Anderson, for this generous invitation, and all of you for making me feel at home, and for easing the anxiety every politician feels standing before a large room full of journalists. Let me also express my admiration for this society's long commitment to upholding the First Amendment, promoting and protecting the free flow of information, and nurturing the great responsibility that comes with an open and independent press. And in this time of unparalleled prosperity and of leadership for the United States, when our globalizing world grows constantly more interconnected, those everywhere who believes in freedom are grateful for your work with the Freedom Forum and for your continuing self-examination of how your newspapers can better cover the international arena and bring responsible and relevant news to your readers. In the Cold War, the United States was deeply concerned with the way it was seen by other nations. In the post-Cold War era, other nations are concerned about how we are viewed politically and economically in the United States. We Colombians welcome and invite increased interaction with the entire spectrum of your media to exchange ideas, challenge misperception, and widen our understanding. The last president of Colombia to speak at your convention was President Virgilio Barco in the year 1986. And from this platform, President Barco made a strong plea for the United States and Latin America to do more together in the war on drugs. Here, the first steps were taken to lead to the landmark 1919 drug summit attended by President Bush in Cartagena. The effort marked the beginning of the end of the Medellin drug cartel. Today, I return here with a similar urgent call for both our nations and the entire international community once again to do more in the fight against a new wave of drug trafficking and drug violence. I also come here to speak candidly about a dangerous problem of misinformation about my country, Colombia. As you know better than anyone, in the era of instant information, it can be difficult to distinguish impressions from truth, and the headline of one news cycle from the cycle of history. Today, I ask you, in a decisive time for my country, to reflect with me on the real Colombia, our strengths, our problems, our resolve, and our prospects. In recent months, Colombia has become what truly can be called a hot topic here in the United States. Mike Wallace, Dan Rather, Charlie Gibson, Tom Friedman have come to Bogota plainly expecting the worst, with a preconceived idea of what our country was all about, in a phrase, violence and cocaine. Yet, they each left with a powerful sense of the character and values of the Colombian people, our commitment to peace and democracy, and our unbending determination to reforming and modernizing our society for the 21st century. What may sometimes be lost in the glare of the media moment is the historic truth that Colombia is South America's oldest, most resilient democracy, and that we Colombians share your long tradition of a free press and open access to information. Our newspapers are a powerful, independent influence, something we politicians learn again every day. El Tiempo, the largest national daily and one of Latin America's most highly respected newspapers, has been at the center of Colombian life for almost a century, along with its main competitor, El Espectador. Our other major cities, and Colombia has 5 cities with over 1 million people, each have influential newspapers, and so do many smaller communities. In reality, it is this regional diversity that defines us as a nation. I could also argue that Colombia stands as a microcosm for all Latin America. Consider just for a moment our geography. Central America ends at our border with Panama. From there to the east, stretch 1,000 miles of Caribbean coastline. At its center, the walled city of Cartagena, once the third most powerful city of the Spanish Empire, is today a magnet for tourists from around the world. To the south, 600 miles along the Pacific Ocean, is an area still largely undeveloped, with extraordinary potential, especially as Asia looks more and more to Latin America. We share borders with Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela, and with Brazil, at the very heart and soul of South America, the vast Amazon rainforest. And across our entire country, which is the size of Texas and California combined, 33 national parks shelter more plant and animal species per square mile than anywhere else in the planet. Yet it is the Andes Mountains, more than anything else, that have shaped Colombia as it is today. Most of the Andes, like the Rockies or the Alps, are one massive chain rising above a continent. But in Colombia, and only in Colombia, the Andes literally branch out into 3 distinct ranges with altitudes that reach 15,000 feet. Crossing Colombia by car is not an easy task and can take many, many days. The distant travel in a 35-minute flight can take an 8 to 10-hour drive. No wonder Colombia was the first country in all of the Americas with a national airline. There is an old saying from the Old West, "Give me men that match our mountains." Colombia has been blessed with a people of energy, faith, and enterprise. We have 67 years of uninterrupted economic growth and a pantheon of Colombians who have made a difference in the wider world. People like scientist Manuel Erkin Patarroyo, the scientist who has done more than anyone to eradicate malaria, or Rodolfo Ginás, a worldwide recognized neurologist. There is our Nobel laureate, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, whose novel 100 Years of Solitude has sold more than 30 million copies in over 40 languages. Fernando Botero, whose sculptures have lined Park Avenue and the Champs-Élysées. Juan Pablo Montoya, our Formula Kart world champion, and Shakira, our amazing Spanish rock superstar. And I also take pride in reminding people that six out of every 10 fresh cut flowers imported to the United States come from Colombia. That we are your 7th largest source of crude petroleum, and will soon become the world's 3rd largest exporter of coal. Such is the Colombia of our history and our hopes, a Colombia which today also faces fateful choices. The choices and the crises are, in my view, often misreported and misunderstood. I am regularly surprised and sometimes genuinely stunned by what I read in the foreign press. When you see your country's name continually misspelled, even in the most distinguished newspaper, you naturally worry about the rest of the reporting. And even when a wire service is not saying that the United States is being drawn into a guerrilla war, some editorial board here is predicting my government's imminent collapse. A ripple can too easily be mistaken for a wave. The limelight on one event can obscure the complicated interplay of underlying events. The problem is not of one of intentions. I know the need to capture and convey drama in a headline or in a news story. Still, I ask you to imagine what it's like when El Tiempo or our evening TV news report a standoff between a guerrilla unit and an army platoon several miles away from Bogota, and the headline in the United States reads, "Colombia's capital under siege." For us, every single casualty is a cause for national concern, but it is not a signal of national collapse. To understand modern-day Colombia, we must look beyond the incidents and see the conditions for what they are, or in this case, as they are not. For the starters, Colombia is not in the midst of a civil war, despite what it is continually said in the international media. Colombians have never referred to this conflict as a civil war, for the simple reason that it is not one. A civil war occurs in a divided nation, torn apart into armed camps of more or less the same size. Ireland, the former Yugoslavia, and the Congo, these are present-day examples of civil wars. Colombia case is dramatically different. There are approximately 35,000 well-armed and well-financed insurgents, both guerrilla and paramilitary, operating mainly in the remote countryside. They have inflicted enormous suffering, killing innocent civilians, driving others from their homes and villages, and blocking any chance for development and progress. But the insurgents make up barely one-tenth of 1% of the total population of Colombia. Militarily, their tactics are classic guerrilla hit and run, strike and retreat. Every time they have faced the Colombian armed forces out in the open, they have been silently defeated. And unlike guerrilla movements in other places, they have completely failed to convince Colombians that they provide a legitimate alternative to our tested democracy. The guerrilla roots are in the 40s and in the 50s, at the very height of the Cold War. In the decades that follow, however, their support steadily decreased until today, when the guerrillas can claim little more than 3 or 4% of popular support. Even intellectuals and university students, once the bedrock of guerrilla sympathy, have turned against them as they wage continuous war on the civilian population. The guerrillas' loss of support reflects more than the end of Cold War confrontation. Colombia today is a much more modern, urban, and just society than it was a half-century ago. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a civil war, and even though billions of dollars generated by drug trafficking sustain the violence, the guerrillas cannot overthrow our democracy, and no one knows this better than they do. Yet, the talk so common here in the United States of a Colombian government under siege or on the verge of collapse has given rise to another false assumption, namely that Colombia is somehow another Vietnam. A quarter century after the fall of Saigon, the shadow of Vietnam understandably continues to shape public opinion and influence policymakers. But Colombia is not Vietnam, and for many reasons. While Vietnam was a divided country and an ideological battlefield, its borders imposed by the Geneva Accords of 1954, Colombia is a unified nation with a strong national identity where 95% and more of our citizens believe in democracy, in freedom of the press, and on an open economy. While Vietnam had been a colony under foreign domination for over a century, Colombia has been a free and independent nation since defeating the Spanish Empire in 1819. The Viet Cong enjoy significant support, while the Colombian insurgents are almost entirely without political support or sympathy. And equally important is the fact that while Vietnam was a distant Asian country, Colombia is an integral part of this hemisphere. Colombia is your neighbor, with Bogota roughly the same distance from New York to Los Angeles. What must be understood is how drug trafficking and its obscene profits have changed the very nature of our conflict. My own opinion, one shared by most Colombians, is that we will already be a nation at peace were it not for the violence and corruption fueled by the illegal drug trade. No nation has suffered as severely as Colombia from the boom in the demand for illegal drugs over the last generation. Rather than fall victim to this menace, we have systematically opposed it, taken on and destroyed ruthless cartels from Medellin and Cali. The cost has been high. Imagine United States Supreme Court justices murdered in their chambers, or federal judges from Miami, Los Angeles, or Chicago killed by the scores. Imagine 1/5 of your FBI and local police forces wounded or killed with their wives and children also targeted. Imagine courageous public officials, cabinet ministers and mayors, senators, governors, and presidential candidates gunned down for giving voice to a society that refuses to back down. Imagine being given just one option: plata o bala, a bribe or a bullet. And I ask all of you to imagine newspaper editors, publishers, and reporters shot in cold blood, their offices bombed into rubble, or exiled because they will not be intimidated, because they held on to that conviction that was worth living for, and all too tragically, all too often worth dying for as well. Imagine this, my friends, and you get a clear idea of what Colombia has endured in this generation. Heroic men and women have paid the ultimate price, earning the lasting admiration of all Colombians, and we will never forget their sacrifice. So we fight on, we push back the forces of violence, and then we read that Colombia is on the verge of collapse, of becoming a narco-terrorist state. Nothing is further from the truth. Indeed, after the breakup of the cartels, the nature of the drug trafficking has changed dramatically. Unlike the days of Pablo Escobar, the leader of the Medellin cartel, The drug war was shifted from the cities to the Amazon region, particularly to the south, to the Putumayo. Today, a new breed of criminals operates in smaller organizations, underground, with closer ties to traffickers in other countries. Indeed, drug mafias too have become increasingly globalized. There is a growing awareness in Colombia that the United States and around the world that the threat of drug trafficking is no longer a national or a regional issue. For example, the precursor chemicals needed to process cocaine are smuggled into Colombia from abroad, while most of the tainted profit that driven the drug trade end up invested in financial markets abroad. As long as a demand exists, there will be suppliers somewhere to meet it. This is why we urgently need improvements in education and prevention, as well as more drug treatment facilities. Colombia's resolve to combat production and distribution had not lessened but intensified. Last October, after months of preparation, and with the help of your drug enforcement agencies, we conducted the most important worldwide drug bust in over 5 years. In Operation Millennium, 30 of the most powerful of the new breed of drug traffickers were arrested across Colombia and elsewhere. And we have sent those still at large the strongest message in the clearest possible terms. Drug traffickers will never be tolerated in Colombia, and we are determined to destroy them and their empires. This morning we finished what we call Operation Millennium #2, in which we captured more than 46 members of the cartel of the heroin that was sending to the United States the largest amount of heroin to this country. Even the cousin of Pablo Escobar, that was the leader of this cartel, was captured this morning, and we are destroying one of the largest cartels in the world on the heroin business. But Colombia cannot and should not continue to bear the greatest weight of this global crisis. I have taken the message of greater burden sharing in the fight against drugs to the international community. The most common argument is that you could become, and I quoted, entangled in a Vietnam-like quagmire. I would like to make one more point about this, one that I cannot emphasize too strongly. Implicit in the Vietnam analogy is the belief that the United States will end up committing troops to Colombia. But that is flat out impossible. Neither your public opinion nor ours will support or permit such a move, and neither your government nor ours has considered this even in the most extreme circumstances. It is simply not on the table, and as long as I am President of Colombia, this will not happen. You can quote me on that. What Colombia has proposed and your government endorses is giving us the resources, the hardware, and the training needed to combat the changing nature of the drug trade. This means exposing and penetrating remote jungle areas once beyond the sustained reach of our security forces. Early on, I spoke of our unique geographic makeup and how this has influenced our development as a nation. Well, this unique geography also plays a critical part in this war against narcotics, where often inaccessible areas have become hotbeds for cocaine production, areas we could not fully control in the past, but where our reach is now becoming increasingly stronger. Our strategy here is twofold. In the end, we must negotiate a meaningful peace agreement with the guerrillas. But from the beginning, we must root out the drug traffickers and the violence they cause our society and the damage they do to our economy. United States assistance is meant to support counter-narcotics operations, as well as alternative crop development, economic stimulation, and government reforms. Our strategy is called Plan Colombia, a comprehensive blueprint for our future. And while our goal is peace, our first order of business has to be a strengthening of our own institutions, politically, judicial, and military. No peace process can succeed without the institutional strength to support it. And above all, Our democratic institution must serve the people, and this means guaranteeing their fundamental human rights. Plan Colombia cost is estimated at $7.5 billion over the next 3 years. My government is pledged to providing $4 billion while actively seeking additional support from the international community. In addition to the Clinton administration assistance package, we will be meeting with the European leaders at a conference this July in Spain. I have called our efforts diplomacy for peace, because if we have learned anything from the recent progress in Northern Ireland, Central America, and the Middle East, it is that the international community must be actively engaged in order for peace to prevail. A Colombia at peace is in everyone's interest. Not only will it bring an end to the violence and human rights violations, so those displaced from their homes can return to them unafraid. A Colombia at peace also depends on one more effective counter-narcotics operation in terms of both interdiction and alternative crop of subsistence farmers. That means not only less violence on our street, but less drug trafficking on yours. Every shipment of drugs we stop in Colombia is a shipment that doesn't reach American neighborhoods, playgrounds, and schools. In Colombia, the last year and a half has witnessed dramatic steps forward in the name of peace. Never in our history has there been such a commitment from all sectors of our society to bring a lasting end to the violence and an honorable end to the insurgency. Only days after my election, I flew to the jungle to meet with the leaders of the FARC, the oldest and largest guerrilla group. I was the first president to do so. Since then, we have agreed to a 12-point agenda for negotiations. And only last month, government and guerrilla delegations traveled in Europe together in order to show the guerrillas, who have lived in almost total seclusion for decades, how the world has changed and the wide range of new social democratic models. More recently, last weekend, we started with the public hearings procedure, which will give all citizens the chance to make their contribution to the peace process. At the same time, Richard Grasso, chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, Congressman Bill Delahunt of Massachusetts, or Jim Kimsey, founder of American Online, and Joe Robert are just a few of those who have met with the guerrilla leaders, carrying a realistic message of progress and development, of the shared prosperity that can come with peace. Such exchanges go a long way to remove outdated stereotypes and suspicions. They show the guerrillas the intentions of the international community, the opportunities available to a united, peaceful Colombia, and the potent fact that guerrilla warfare has no part in a modern nation. Perhaps more important have been the strides on the domestic front. A little over a year ago, more than 10 million Colombians, almost one-third of the entire country, march, and here is Francisco Santos that promotes these type of marches, march peacefully through our streets, calling for a negotiated end to the insurgency. And just as Plan Colombia recognizes the need for strong, accountable institutions to sustain any peace agreement, we are convinced that only by engaging civil society as a whole, labor unions and business executives, teachers and healthcare workers, farmers and truck drivers, only then we can meet everyone's legitimate needs. Equally important is the economy. Job creation, low inflation and interest rates, sustained GDP growth, all of these plays a decisive role in strengthening our society. So does expanding trade and attracting more foreign investment, another way the international community can help. The sheer size of our economy, around $86 billion, makes Colombia one of the largest and most attractive markets for the U.S. trade and investment in all the Americas. Bilateral trade with the United States exceeded $8 billion last year. There are over 120 U.S. companies operating successfully in Colombia, most of them for many decades. Political strength and economic health are bound together. At the end of the day, Colombia cannot be a nation at peace if it is not a nation in prosperity. Plan Colombia, also includes the most ambitious and organized strategy of social reform that has ever been proposed in my country. The purpose of this reform is to create new and better opportunities for progress for the poorest Colombians. This component of Plan Colombia includes, on the one hand, the Social Emergency Fund, made up of the three basic programs: Hands to Work, subsidy for the poor families, and training for the unemployed youth. All of these programs geared toward creating a better quality of life for the most needy through investment in health, education, and job creation. On the other hand, we will assign more than $2 billion for alternative development and human rights and humanitarian aid programs. The first program seeks to go beyond crop substitution by promoting a comprehensive regional development strategy that will generate legal work alternatives for Colombian peasants. In matters of human rights and humanitarian aid, we intend to improve the mechanisms for the respect and protection of these rights and the attention of the victims of the armed conflict, with a special emphasis on displaced people. One of the main enemies we face to make Colombia a peaceful and prosperous nation is corruption. This terrible cancer, on one hand, undermines the legitimacy of the government, and on the other, subverts social ethics, creating a vicious cycle of mistruth and despair. For instance, a large corruption scandal was recently uncovered in our Congress, thanks to my government's accusations. And as a result, a very serious investigation is being carried out to uncover those responsible. However, the magnitude of this case demands a more profound response, one that assures this will never happen again. It is necessary to make a radical reform of our political system, and especially in all the branches of the government. And for that reason, last week, based on our Constitution and our laws, I proposed the Colombian people a referendum in which they will vote for a change for honesty and transparency in the way of doing politics. More than 90% of the Colombian people have expressed their support for this initiative, which I am sure will serve as the cornerstone of the transformation of our democratic system. In closing, I would like to extend to all of you, as leaders in American journalism, an open invitation to visit Colombia. Talking about misperception will do little unless you are given the first-hand access. Our problems are formidable, yet our nationwide determination to overcome them is making a difference. I want nothing more than to demonstrate that our resolve and our progress are much more than words delivered from a podium. Behind my invitation stands a big, bold, and beautiful land. It is a land full of people who will welcome you in their homes and neighborhoods, villages and schools, their soccer fields, offices, and places of worship. You will hear the stories of great success and serious struggle. You will witness sorrow mixed with joy, and only then will you understand the real Colombia. By helping us, I believe that in the truest sense, you also help your own country. Only provide us with the tools, and we will do the job. I thank you for this opportunity to speak here today, and I hope for a new beginning in the way you see our report about Colombia. Thank you very much.
President Pastrana has agreed to answer just a couple of questions. He has an appointment on Capitol Hill. If you would remember the rules, AS&E members only, please, your name and your newspaper. Tony?
Tony Peterson, Houston Chronicle, Houston, Texas. Mr. President, I'm pleased to say that I'll be able to accept your invitation. I'll be in your country next month.
Thank you.
It'll be good to see you again. I would like to ask you to comment specifically on how you view the level of cooperation between the Justice Department of the United States and law enforcement and justice officials in your country, And specifically, I believe you are on record as saying that you would be willing to consider a resumption of extradition proceedings with the United States involving drug suspects. And can you comment on how the Justice Department is doing in that regard, and if there are any issues that need to be addressed?
Yes, as you will know, we have an agreement signed between the Attorney's Office and the Minister of Justice, Colombia, in exchange of evidence regarding drug trafficking and criminal reports. I think that this has been very important for us. I think that since my inauguration, we have doubled the efforts, and we have an extra relation with the Attorney's Office, with Mr. General Reno. We've been working very close in attacking this common enemy that is narco-trafficking. As I mentioned in my speech, we did what we call the Millennium Operation. That is, I think this is the largest operation done in the last year. We captured these 30 Colombians that are asked by the United States to be judged in this country. We said that we are willing to once again work very closely with the United States, even promoting, as we did some months ago, extraditing for the first time in 10 years a Colombian that is going to be judged in the United States. But at the same time, what we're proposing is that we need to work very hard and very rapidly, because, for example, all the people that were captured in the Millennium Operation, we are expecting all the evidence to look forward and push forward the Supreme Court, all the mechanisms that are needed to work on these type of extraditions. In Colombia, you need the approval of the Supreme Court to extradite, and then the approval of the President of Colombia to send them if they're asking extradition in other countries. And we need to work very hard and very quickly, because you could imagine that in our countries, in our jails, these guys with such amount of money, willing to pay bribes, it's very difficult to keep them. The figures that many times people mention that are willing to pay to officials there are figures that are so high that you can never imagine, because they're willing to pay not only lawyers, but also bribes so they can leave the jail and avoid any type of judge in the United States. So we've been working very hard, and I think that for the first time, all the information, the sharing of information has been very useful. Even as I was mentioning today, we had Millennium Operation 2. Today we captured 46 Colombians. Basically, this was concentrated in the heroin cartel. This morning, more than 1,300 policemen, with the help also of the Drug Agency of the United States, with the help of the Attorney's Office in Colombia, the Fiscalia, with 65 prosecutors, we captured 46 members of this heroin cartel. The leader, as I said before, was the cousin of Pablo Escobar, the leader of the Medellin cartel. And I think, as I have the information from the police, this is really hitting the largest exporter of heroin to this country. So I think we're doing the job. But as we are proposing, as you heard in my speech, we need your help. And we need the help of the international community to unite all our efforts to fight this common enemy, that is narco-trafficking.
Yes, sir. Ray Sullivan with the Lima, Ohio News, not Lima. My question for you, sir, is on the issue of decriminalization. Has there been much in the way of discussion about decriminalization of drugs and what impact that might have on not only international and national relations, but also on political and social implications in your country?
Yeah, we're not in favor of that, and even I think that the world right now, we have the experience of what happened in the Netherlands. I think that they are going backwards instead of going forwards in the decriminalizing and giving drugs. I think that, and that's why I talk of Plan Colombia, because for the first time we're not only looking the policing aspect of the problem. For the first time we have a coherent, comprehensive plan that is called Plan Colombia, because the only way really of getting rid of drugs in our country is investing also in alternative development. Now a farmer, a peasant, is earning about 1.5 minimum salary of Colombia, so we need to try to bring crops that will give them a way or good earnings so they could stay in their own lands. And that's why in Plan Colombia we have proposed a lot of projects. For example, Colombia is very competitive in palm oil. We could have at least 1 million hectares of palm oil, and Colombia will be very competitive.
Unfortunately for us, the best land, for example, for palm oil, is located in the most violent area of Colombia, that is what we call the Magdalena Medio, the territory. So there's one possibility. But at the same time, as I also said here, we need to integrate also with the Europeans, because many times they feel that there's not their problem. And you have to see how the drug not only affects your neighbors, your schools, your play yards, but also how it's affecting the environment. I've said that if you want cocaine, you need the coca plant or the coca leaf. At the same time, if you want to get heroin, you need the poppy plant. But the same thing, if you want cocaine or heroin, you need the chemicals. With them, it's impossible to produce cocaine or heroin. Most of the chemicals and most of the precursors come from Europe, basically Germany and the Netherlands. So that's why we're asking them, if you give us a hand on this, we will avoid the production of these type of drugs. And one thing that happened in our country is that drug is destroying the environment, because basically most of the labs are located on the riverside. Colombia has, I think, like 3,000 kilometers of rivers, that those are the highways of getting in arms and dynamites and missiles, and the highway to bring out drugs from our country. But most of the labs that are located on the riverside throw these chemicals to the rivers that are the ones that goes to the rainforest. We have cut in the last years 1 million hectares of rainforest in our country. As you will know, the Amazon produces 60% of the oxygen of the world. So that's why we're telling the Europeans, look, we need your help, because here is a global problem. And now every time that we go after these illicit crops, they go further and further to the south, and is going closer and closer to the rainforest, basically to the Amazon. So that's why we need to recall the attention that we need the help of the whole world. And I think that if we could develop this type of programs, alternative development, the people will not be involved in this criminal organization. The peasants in Colombia, they don't want to be in the illicit crop or illegally. They want a way of earning their lives to give education and a good quality of life for their children. Thank you.
How long will you be in town? I'll be this night and this afternoon. I have a meeting with the Minister of Recruitment. We have lunch tomorrow. 3:30 we'll have a meeting with Prime Minister Rueda. We need to get the commitment also from the Europeans to help us. We're going to have a donor table on July 7th in Madrid. So,
Yo creo que al país explicarle todo el procedimiento ahorita de lo que estamos viviendo es una situación al interior de los mecanismos legales que se tiene para sacar el presupuesto adelante. Ustedes lo oyeron aquí en este mismo sitio por parte del senador Lott. La ayuda llegará a Colombia a más tardar en la primera semana de junio. Es lo que ha dicho. Está buscando los mecanismos y el procedimiento para sacar adelante la ayuda de Colombia. Hay un compromiso por parte de él, de los republicanos. Hay un compromiso por parte de los demócratas. Lo más importante, ustedes recuerdan que siempre lo hemos nosotros dicho aquí en Estados Unidos. Colombia no quiere ser el jamón del sándwich. No quiere ser utilizado ni en favor de unos ni en contra de los otros. Lo que necesitamos es el respaldo bipartidista al Plan Colombia, y eso es lo que hemos obtenido en la Cámara y es lo que aspiramos a obtener en el Senado de los Estados Unidos. Se están buscando los mecanismos inclusive para que esa ayuda, como él mismo lo expresó, el caso de Kosovo, el caso de la ayuda interna que quieren Estados Unidos para los temas como los de los huracanes, el caso de Colombia, vaya y tengan ellos mismos el mecanismo para sacarlo lo más pronto posible. Yo creo que lo más importante es que el propio líder de las mayorías en el Senado ha dicho, estamos comprometidos con Colombia, vamos a trabajar con Colombia, vamos a sacar la plata de Colombia y vamos a trabajar por Colombia. A ver, ¿quién? No, estamos hablando más o menos, estamos cumpliendo el horario, es decir, más o menos estamos cumpliendo lo que se había presupuestado.
Y nosotros le hemos dicho, es muy importante para nosotros tener una señal ante el mundo de que los Estados Unidos está comprometido al igual que la Unión Europea. Yo creo que lo que queremos hacer aquí es muy importante, es también enviar la señal a Europa, por eso vamos mañana o esta tarde, estaremos viajando hacia Londres para poder compartir con el secretario de Relaciones, el señor Cook, y con el primer ministro Blair, la importancia de que Europa respalde la mesa de donantes o de aportantes, porque claramente es fundamental el respaldo de Inglaterra. Sí. Muy importante. No, a ver, no, esto es una operación más de gente que venía cometiendo delitos en Colombia, de gente que había, y eso desde el día de mi salida el lunes en Bogotá, estuvimos hablando con el general Serrano de la operación, de que se iba a celebrar precisamente como se celebró en la madrugada de hoy. Yo creo que este también es un mensaje muy importante en este momento a los Estados Unidos. Colombia está comprometido en la lucha contra la droga. Hicimos Operación Milenio 1, hicimos y estamos haciendo Operación Milenio 2. Yo creo que por primera vez, o no por primera vez, desde hace muchos años, está absolutamente entregado el trabajo que estamos haciendo con la señora Reunión, que está haciendo con el Ministerio de Justicia, que están trabajando los organismos de inteligencia, se están buscando todos los mecanismos y procedimientos para fortalecer la lucha contra el narcotráfico. Y yo creo que esta es hoy una señal muy importante que le estamos dando a los Estados Unidos, que hemos capturado en buena parte el cartel de la heroína, de quienes estaban comprometidos en el envío de heroína hacia los Estados Unidos, y yo creo que aquí hay un aspecto muy importante, y lo hemos reiterado hoy en todas las reuniones, porque así nos lo han preguntado también. Sí, nosotros hemos dicho que estamos comprometidos con la extradición, hemos dicho que quien comete un delito, ustedes ya lo saben, los colombianos, de bien, hemos dicho que vamos a combatir el narcotráfico. Se reiniciaron las extradiciones hace algunos meses, como bien lo conocen los Estados Unidos, y nosotros lógicamente estamos esperando como corresponde todo el trámite legal, y por eso estamos pidiendo a los Estados Unidos que podamos agilizar todos los documentos que sean necesarios para que podamos cumplir con este requisito. Alejandra, la última. A ver, no se tiene muy claro. La verdad que yo creo que tanto en los Estados Unidos como en Colombia el compromiso es perseguir y castigar a los narcotraficantes, pero no tenemos toda información muy clara a ese respecto. Bueno, llevamos el Plan Colombia, que es lo más importante. Lo que hemos dicho, el Plan Colombia es el plan de los pobres del país, es el plan de la gente más pobre de Colombia, y por eso yo creo que no solamente lo que hemos hecho aquí en el Congreso de obtener recursos, sino igualmente lo que hicimos con el Fondo Monetario Internacional, el respaldo que hemos tenido de la banca multilateral, porque aquí vinimos fue a conseguir la plata, reitero, para la gente más pobre del país. Estamos hablando de manos a la obra, estamos hablando de los subsidios para las mujeres cabeza de familia de más escasos recursos, para el entrenamiento de los jóvenes también, la educación de los jóvenes universitarios para llevarlos también a las empresas. Entonces estamos reiterando el compromiso de Colombia de trabajar por mantener, como corresponde, las metas que hemos comprometido fiscales para poder sacar la economía adelante. No, la verdad que yo muy contento. Yo creo que todavía estamos trabajando, pero yo estoy muy contento de lo que hemos hecho hasta este momento y que vamos a sacar hacia adelante todos los proyectos.